Do you believe grandma hacks are outdated? Wait until you learn how a single household hack can save you hundreds of euros and endless nerves, and why you should know it right away. Stay tuned, because what's coming now will radically change your routine. Lemon against odors and grease. If the fridge ever smelled musty, Grandma simply placed a halved lemon inside, and the odor was gone. Greasy countertops were rubbed with half a fruit, left for a few minutes, and wiped away with a warm cloth. Baking soda as universal cleaner and odor neutralizer. Grandma placed a bowl of baking soda in the fridge long before gel pads appeared. An old sock filled with baking soda went into the shoe cabinet overnight. Gently and invisibly, the powder absorbed odors. For burnt pots, she handled them with similar calm. She boiled water with a spoonful of baking soda or mixed a paste, applied it to the stubborn spots, and let it sit briefly. Then she scrubbed gently afterward. Vinegar against limescale and dirt. Back then, Grandma reached for the vinegar bottle while the kettle softly hissed on the stove. Acetic acid dissolved limescale deposits in the kettle, which she then rinsed away with clear water. She soaked a cloth in vinegar, wrapped it around the faucet, and waited patiently. Minutes later, she wiped away the deposits, and the pipe shone like new. Oil to dissolve glue residues. Grandma stood in front of the sticky spot and didn't reach for chemical cleaners, but for olive oil. A few drops were enough. She gently dabbed the oil on the label or sticky residue, let it soak in briefly, and then wiped over the surface with a soft cloth. The glue dissolved without leaving traces. Then she rinsed with soapy water and dried off. Rice in the salt shaker against clumps. Sometimes a quick glance was enough, and Grandma sprinkled a few rice grains into the salt shaker before modern drying bundles became relevant. A few grains went in, and the salt stayed powdery dry instead of clumpy. In the morning, you heard the soft clatter when she sprinkled pinches of salt, a familiar sound that brought comfort. The rice absorbed excess moisture, all without much effort. Pay attention to using clean, undamaged grains and rinse the shaker occasionally so no dust accumulates. Collect vegetable scraps for broth. Carrot peels, onion ends, leek scraps ended up in a small container in the freezer. The stock grew quietly over weeks until Grandma combined everything in a large pot. Add water, bay leaf, and peppercorns, and then the soft crackle as the broth simmered. A familiar and comforting aroma rose. She strained the clear liquid, froze it in small portions, and later created soups and sauces full of depth. Pay attention to clean scraps and quick cooling so no flavor is lost and no germs develop. Scraps from mushrooms or herb stems enhance the aroma when used in moderation. Toast, old bread, and leftover utilization. The hard bread that otherwise sat in the box was first cut into thick slices. In the oven, Grandma lightly dried it before turning it into cubes. A splash of oil and a pinch of salt were enough to bake delicious croutons. Sometimes she soaked pieces in a milk-egg mixture and fried them quickly in the pan into savory French toast bites. Leftovers became rustic bread soup. Sauté onions, add water or broth, soak in the bread. Freeze muffins and baked goods. Grandma often baked a large batch of muffins, and before the first ones disappeared, she placed them individually in the freezer. Once the warm cakes had completely cooled, she placed them spaced out on the baking sheet until the edges were lightly firm. Then she filled airtight bags, squeezed out the air, and labeled them with the date. Weeks later, she pulled out a muffin, let it thaw briefly, or pushed it frozen into the oven, and it tasted almost fresh. Each bite was a small ritual. Aroma rose, memories returned. Make sure to let muffins cool completely to avoid freezer burn. Pack them tightly and try different thawing times. Sometimes just room temperature, sometimes briefly in the oven, depending on texture. Portioned dough can also be pre-frozen and baked fresh later. Creatively, use nearly expired spices and condiments. Mustard near its expiration date ended up in a spicy marinade. Ketchup remnants gave bolognese a depth that store-bought lacked. But first, Grandma checked the color and smell because safety came first. Nearly expired soy sauce added umami to the stew when dosed sparingly. Remnants of honey or jam were mixed into glazes for oven vegetables. Sweetness and acidity danced on the tongue. Keep snacks for on-the-go handy. Grandma always tucked a small supply into her bag. A few homemade granola bars, nuts in paper packets, sometimes an apple. Hunger pangs were no issue, because she was prepared. Today, you can imitate that. Choose durable snacks that give you energy and joy. Portion nuts, dried fruits, or homemade energy balls into reusable containers. Label them with dates, check freshness regularly, and clean the boxes so no odor remains. Place them in your bag, backpack, or glove compartment. Clear pipes with baking soda and vinegar. Grandma sometimes stood smiling at the sink and mixed baking soda and vinegar before cleaning the drain. A spoonful of baking soda in, then vinegar. It foamed softly, as if the kitchen was revealing a secret. She waited briefly while the bubbling loosened deposits. Then she poured hot water after, and the pipe flowed freely again. No toxic cleaners, but simple chemistry from the kitchen cabinet. Be careful with the foaming. Keep distance so nothing splashes. She checked old pipes gently before applying full strength. Milk-soaking method for protein and blood stains. Fresh milk was poured into a bowl when blood or protein stains appeared. The container stood ready while Grandma carefully checked the stain. Fresh? Then she placed the fabric piece in. Milk contains enzymes that dissolve the protein without attacking the fiber. Minutes passed while the bowl stood quietly in the kitchen. Afterward, she rinsed the fabric under cold water, rubbed gently, and watched the stain give way. Then the piece went to the normal laundry, never to dry before the stain was gone. Hydrogen peroxide for blood stains. A drop on the fabric, and it began to bubble softly. This quiet crackle promised cleaning. Grandma first tested an inconspicuous corner because she valued color fastness. Then she carefully applied peroxide to the fresh stain, waited 1 to 2 minutes until the bubbles did their work, and rinsed with cold water. She never dried the fabric before the stain was gone. Only on white, color-fast textiles did she dare to use it. Old set-in stains she treated later with enzymatic agents. Toothpaste against crayon and pencil marks. Grandma reached for plain toothpaste when children decorated the wall with crayons. She applied a tiny amount of white paste to an inconspicuous corner as a test. No damage. Then she gently applied toothpaste to the stain and rubbed in circular motions, as if unlocking a secret from the cleaning book. The soft abrasion took up the crayon color until the wall looked calm again. Afterward, she wiped all remnants with a damp cloth to leave no abrasive particles. She first checked glossy or freshly painted surfaces to avoid unpleasant surprises. Scented soap in drawers against moths and company. A piece of lavender soap was carefully placed between the wool sweaters. The gentle scent acted like a guardian calling forests and meadows. No harsh chemicals, but familiar soap remnants that did their work every morning. First, Grandma cut the piece into handy portions, packed it in fine fabric or paper sachets to avoid direct grease stains. Then she placed it in a corner, checked occasionally if the scent faded, and scored the surface lightly to renew it. She kept moisture away by keeping drawers airy. Cooking fat or oil for squeaky hinges. Grandma rarely used an expensive lubricant. Instead, she cut off a small piece of cooking fat or dipped a cloth in vegetable oil when the door squeakers started singing. She cleaned the hinge first, removing dust and old residues. Then she sparingly smeared the hinge pin. A drop was enough. She opened and closed the door several times until the squeaks stopped. She wiped off excess fat so no dust stuck and no slip hazard arose. Sometimes she rinsed beforehand with vinegar water to loosen stubborn dirt. Pillowcase over fan blades for dusting. Grandma climbed onto the small stool to clean the fan and took an old pillowcase. Each fabric envelope caught the dust instead of swirling it through the room. She gently pulled the case over a blade, enclosed it like a secret, and then slowly pulled it back. The fine particles stuck in the fabric. Blade by blade, she proceeded until all wings looked clean. Afterward, she shook out the case outside and washed it with fresh water so the dust didn't return. Safety was important to her. Turn off power, place ladder stably. Sometimes she later used the pillowcase as a dust catcher on shelves to capture remnants again. Baby powder against sand and moisture. Grandma always tucked a small container of baby powder into the beach bag before stepping into the sand with shining eyes. After splashing, she patted feet and legs dry with a towel and sprinkled a fine layer of powder on the still slightly damp skin. The fine powder absorbed water and loosened the sand, which gently fell off instead of sticking to the toes. In sandals, the loose powder trickled between foot and strap, tamed moisture, and prevented unpleasant odors. She gently shook excess sand outside before getting into the car. Salt against red wine stains. When red wine spilled over the tablecloth, Grandma reacted immediately. She carefully dabbed the drop with a clean cloth without rubbing. Then she reached for the salt. Generously, she sprinkled it on the damp spot. The white grains absorbed the liquid, keeping the color on top instead of pressing it into the fabric. After a few minutes, she gently swept away the salt and rinsed the spot with cold water. Sometimes she repeated the process until no color rim remained. No panic, but swift action. Use residual heat when cooking. Grandma turned down the flame and let the stew stand quietly long before thinking about turning it off. The residual heat from the stove continued to work while the aroma spread further. She put the lid on the pot and went about her tidying, knowing that flavors deepened in the standing phase. In the oven, she turned it off minutes before the end and left the casserole inside until it gently finished cooking. Plates went in to stay warm for serving. She used less energy this way and saved time because nothing needed recooking. She noted, 5 to 10 minutes are often enough for flavor and temperature to harmonize harmoniously. Have sponge for double lifespan. Sometimes the hard bread sat in the box and waited for a new purpose. Grandma cut thick slices and sent them briefly into the oven to dry before turning them into savory croutons. A splash of oil, a pinch of salt, and the crunch under the fork became a familiar sound. She soaked remnants in a milk-egg mixture and fried them into hearty French toast bites. Leftover bread pieces went into the rustic soup. Onions sweated in the pan. Then she added broth and laid in the bread until it absorbed the aromas. Hot water against fresh stains. Grandma immediately reached for the kettle when a fresh stain appeared. She held the fabric piece over the sink while the water boiled quickly. A narrow stream of hot liquid ran over the affected spot. Pigments dissolved as if the stain was rinsed from the inside out. Afterward, she rinsed with cold water to neutralize heat and residues. For delicate fabric, she tested on an inconspicuous corner. Test first, then act. With sturdy cotton fabrics, she was bolder. No rubbing, just flowing water. Brown sugar for extra crispy bacon. Grandma always placed a pinch of brown sugar on the bacon before putting it in the oven. First, she dusted each slice thinly so the sugar caramelized during heating. The sweet-salty contrast emerged like magic. In the oven, the fat melted gently while the sugar formed a glaze. Shortly before the edges got too dark, she took the bacon out. It was crispy, shiny, and aromatic. This small detail transformed everyday life. Breakfast became an experience. Caution was needed. Too much heat burns sugar. Decrust baking sheet with baking soda and vinegar. Grandma stirred baking soda with some warm water into a viscous paste. Then she applied the paste to the stubborn spots. She poured vinegar into a spray bottle and distributed it over the baking soda layer. The soft bubbling worked like magic from Grandma's kitchen. Minutes passed while the mixture dissolved residues. Afterward, she took a soft sponge and scrubbed gently. Burnt-in crusts gave way without needing harsh chemicals. She rinsed remnants with hot water. The sheet shone again. The process took time, but it ran in the background while she did other housework. Caution was needed. On coated sheets, she tested first on a corner. Baking soda against odors in the fridge. Grandma always placed an open bowl of baking soda in the fridge before odors set in. A small container was enough. Often, she checked the scent when fetching cheese. Neutral stays neutral. Baking soda absorbed unpleasant aromas instead of letting them circulate deep in the appliance. If remnants smelled strong, she wiped shelves with warm water beforehand, removed forgotten bowls. Then she filled fresh baking soda into a bowl, placed it in the middle. She replaced it every few weeks. Use coffee grounds as everyday helper. Used coffee grounds were saved and spread out to dry. Later, Grandma used them as a familiar everyday helper. A spoonful in the flower pot revitalized the soil, especially for hydrangeas. The green became lusher. She filled remnants into small bowls and placed them in the fridge to bind odors instead of buying ready-made deodorizers. She gently scrubbed stubborn pan residues with a damp sponge and some grounds. The kitchen floor shone again without scratchy cleaners. In the garden, she sprinkled dry grounds as a barrier around tender seedlings, and snails moved on. Sometimes she stirred oil and grounds into a scrub, massaged hands, and felt the fine tingle of old times. It should be slightly damp but not moldy. Clean windows and mirrors with vinegar and newspaper. Grandma took vinegar and water, mixed them in a spray bottle, and lightly sprayed the window pane. Then she reached for crumpled newspaper. With firm but gentle strokes, she polished glass and mirrors. No foam, no streaks. The sun reflected clearly as in Grandma's youth. First, she removed coarse dust, then sprayed vinegar mist and polished with newspaper until no spot remained. She quickly wiped frames afterward to remove vinegar residues. Use pasta cooking water for plants. Grandma caught every drop of pasta cooking water in a bowl instead of pouring it away. After cooling, she poured it lukewarm onto the potted plants. The fine starch nourished soil and roots without burning them. She used only lightly salted water, avoiding salt residues with care. Sometimes she stirred in a spoonful of cooled rice water. Shine silver cutlery with aluminum foil and baking soda. Grandma placed silver cutlery in a bowl lined with aluminum foil and sprinkled baking soda over it. She carefully poured hot water in. A soft bubbling began as the tarnish colors gently disappeared. After a few minutes, she lifted out the forks and rinsed them. A soft cloth dried them gently until the silver shone again. Use potato peels as gentle abrasive. Grandma collected fresh potato peels after peeling and distributed them in the damp pan. With gentle pressure, she rubbed peel by peel over crusted spots. The fine starch dissolved crusts without scratching the coating. Afterward, she rinsed with warm water and dried pan and board. Grandma closed the door, smiled, and knew. Small gestures change everyday life. If you dare to try these simple home remedies, you'll save time, money, and create moments full of memory. Do you like the hacks? Then give a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so no wisdom is lost. Share in the comments your favorite grandma household hack or tell which hack surprised you the most. Stay curious and try it out. Until next time, when we browse Grandma's kitchen wisdom together and make everyday life a bit smarter.